Welcome the Lord's chosen. Some people give hugs, others give advice, but the chosen ones, they hand out ego deaths like party favors at a funeral. Now let's pause here. That may sound dramatic, maybe even funny, but the truth behind it will hit harder than you think. Science has shown that the human ego, that fragile identity we cling to, reacts to truth the same way the body reacts to physical injury. The brain literally registers it as pain. That's why when you walk into a room carrying raw authenticity, people don't just feel uncomfortable. Their very sense of self begins to glitch like bad software facing a system update it never asked for. And here's where it gets wild. Most people spend their lives protecting an image they've photoshopped in their minds, not realizing it's already outdated. You, the chosen one, don't need to swing swords or shout sermons. Your very presence turns those false versions of people into expired applications. One glance, one word, sometimes even your silence, and the ego starts packing its bags like it just got eviction papers from the universe. But let's be honest, it's hilarious watching someone's I'm untouchable persona trip over itself the moment you show up. They'll call you intimidating, arrogant, or even too much, when in reality they're just attending the funeral of the mask they wore for too long. And the craziest part, you didn't even RSVP to their breakdown. It came free with your energy. This isn't about breaking people down for the fun of it. No, this is about the spiritual OGs, the ones who don't just preach ego death, but embody it, breathe it, and force everyone around them to confront what's real. They ain't never seen a soul dismantle illusions the way you do, and that's exactly why your story needs to be told. Number one, you don't kill egos. You bury generational illusions. That's a truth most people can't handle because they think when they meet you, you're simply attacking their pride in the moment, but what really happens goes much deeper than an argument or a bruised feeling. The resistance you stir in people doesn't come from something you said yesterday or the way you carry yourself today. It comes from something far older, something that's been handed down like an heirloom, a way of thinking, a way of surviving, a way of pretending. Families, cultures, and societies pass down illusions like they pass down recipes. Illusions of superiority, illusions of control, illusions of this is who we are. These patterns don't just belong to the individual in front of you, they belong to their father, their mother, their grandmother, maybe even their ancestors centuries back. Each generation reinforces the story, dresses it up, and hands it off to the next. By the time it reaches them, the illusion feels like unshakable truth. They don't even know it's an illusion. They think it's their personality. They think it's their identity. And then they meet you. When you show up, it's not that you're dismantling their ego in some casual debate. What you're doing is breaking the chain of illusions that's been looping for years before they were even born. The reason they react so strongly to you is because you're not fighting them alone. You're confronting every false belief their lineage has protected. You're not pushing against one person's pride, you're pushing against an entire bloodline's defense system. That's why their anger feels generational. That's why their discomfort cuts so deep. It's not you versus them, it's truth versus inheritance. You bury those illusions because you carry a frequency that doesn't negotiate with lies. You don't argue with them, you don't try to convince them, and you don't play along. You stand there, and their illusions begin to collapse on their own. That's burial. That's laying falsehoods in the ground, never to be resurrected. They may hate you for it, but what really unnerves them is this. You didn't just make them question themselves. You made them question the foundation their entire family tree stood on. And once that illusion is buried, there's no digging it back up. It's gone for good. Number two, they thought you'd preach love. You introduced surgery. That's the difference between what people expect from a spiritual presence and what you actually bring. Most people have been conditioned to think that spirituality means comfort, soft words, and a constant pat on the back. They expect someone who will soothe their wounds, tell them everything will be all right, and let them stay exactly where they are. That's the version of love people have romanticized, a blanket that covers up the mess without ever cleaning it. But when you show up, you don't give out that watered-down version of love. You don't stroke egos or hand out affirmations that only feed the very disease holding them back. What you bring is more like a surgeon stepping into an operating room. You don't come with pillows and flowers, you come with sharpness. You come with precision. You come with the kind of truth that slices through excuses, false beliefs, and delusions like a scalpel. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it makes people recoil. But surgery isn't meant to feel good while it's happening. It's meant to save the patient's life. The difference is clear when people react to you. They expected you to be a healer who sings them lullabies. Instead, you became the one who reaches into the hidden parts of their soul and removes what's rotting there. That's why they call you harsh, cold, or unkind. They don't realize you're showing them a love deeper than anything they've ever encountered. It's not emotional candy, it's not empty comfort, it's discipline, it's cleansing. And it's the kind of love that refuses to let someone self-destruct without intervention. Surgery is messy, there's cutting, there's bleeding, and there's a period of recovery that feels worse before it feels better. But in the end, the infection is gone, the blockage is removed, and healing becomes possible. That's what you bring to people's lives. You don't allow them to carry on with poison disguised as pride or illusions disguised as truth. You dig it out, even if they scream. They'll resist you in the moment, but deep down their soul knows it needed what you carried. That's not soft love. That's surgical love. And not everyone is built to deliver it. Number 3, ego death isn't your weapon. It's your shadow. That's what makes you so different from the rest. Most people try to use ego death as a tool, as if it's something they can control or apply when convenient. They drop a few hard truths here and there, hoping it will humble others, but that's still coming from the ego itself. It's performative. In your case, you don't try to cause ego death. You don't strategize about it. It simply happens because of who you are. It trails you like a shadow, and anyone who crosses your path ends up facing parts of themselves they've been running from their entire lives. This is why people find you unsettling even when you've done nothing to provoke them. It's not about you trying to be intimidating. It's not about you forcing a lesson. Your energy itself is disruptive to illusions, and the ego can't coexist peacefully with it. It's like standing under a light that reveals every hidden flaw. People don't hate you because you've wronged them. They hate you because you expose them to themselves. That shadow follows you everywhere, and the closer they get to you, the harder it is for their false selves to survive. The fascinating part is that this isn't something you can switch off. You might even wish you could, because it often isolates you. People pull away not because you've harmed them, but because their egos feel like they're dying just by being near you. And in truth, they are. Every mask they wear, every identity they've borrowed, every illusion they've clung to begins to crack and collapse in your presence. You don't have to lift a finger. The shadow does the work. This is what separates you from those who talk about transformation but secretly preserve their own pride. For you, transformation is involuntary. It happens around you like a ripple effect. The ego death you carry isn't a tactic, it's a natural consequence of your being. That's why people can leave you angry, confused, or even shaken, yet still find themselves changed in ways they can't explain. You don't deliver ego death as a choice, you embody it. And the shadow that follows you ensures that no one walks away untouched. Number 4. They weren't ready for a mirror that doesn't flatter. Most people live their lives surrounded by reflections they've carefully chosen. Friends who affirm their every move, environments that echo their pride back to them, and systems designed to reward performance instead of truth. In those spaces, they've grown used to seeing only what they want to see. They mistake applause for authenticity, likes for love, and attention for acceptance. Everything is designed to polish the image, not reveal the cracks. So when they meet you, it feels like standing in front of a mirror that refuses to play along. You don't reflect their curated image. You don't validate the roles they've rehearsed or the costumes they've sewn together from society's scraps. Instead, what shines back from you is the part they've been hiding from themselves. The rot under the fabric, the insecurities under the pride, the fear beneath the performance. You don't do this to shame them, but truth by nature exposes what illusion works so hard to conceal. And for most, that kind of exposure feels unbearable. That's why they tremble. Not because you've insulted them, but because for the first time, they can't edit the reflection. They can't filter it, can't adjust the angle, can't blur the flaws. You are the uncooperative mirror that shows them what's real. And it's not the polished image they've built up over years, it's the decay they've ignored while chasing admiration. People lash out at you because it's easier than facing what they see. They call you judgmental, harsh, or dangerous, when in reality, you've only revealed what was already there. You don't create their shadows, you just refuse to hide them. And deep down, they know you're showing them the part of themselves that needs to be confronted if they ever want to grow. That's what makes you unforgettable and to some unbearable. A flattering mirror maintains the illusion. You break it. And in that breaking, you give them the most terrifying and liberating gift of all, the chance to finally meet themselves without disguise. Whether they embrace it or run from it is up to them, but one thing is certain. After standing in your reflection, they can never pretend not to know the truth again. Number 5, you're not humbling people, you're exposing false thrones. That's the real weight you carry, and it's why so many feel threatened by your presence. Humbling someone suggests you're trying to pull them down a notch, teach them a lesson, or correct their pride. But what you do goes far beyond that. You don't just lower egos. You dismantle illusions of authority that were never real in the first place. You reveal that what they're sitting on isn't a throne at all, but a pile of dust dressed up to look like power. People cling to positions, titles, and influence as if those things define them. They believe a label gives them identity. They think a platform gives them weight. They treat recognition like it equals legitimacy. But the truth you carry strips all that away in seconds. Your presence makes it clear that titles are paper crowns, influence is borrowed currency, and positions can vanish overnight. You don't have to say much for people to feel it. They suddenly realize that the authority they worship doesn't carry real substance in the face of someone whose foundation is rooted in something eternal. This is why their reactions to you are so strong. You don't play along with the game of status. You don't bow to credentials, appearances, or fabricated importance. You carry yourself with a kind of quiet dominion that doesn't need introduction or applause, and that shakes the ones who thought their false thrones made them untouchable. Your energy doesn't humiliate them. It exposes the emptiness of the chair they've been guarding with their life. What makes it sting is the realization that everything they built their identity on is fragile. Their power can't survive without validation. Their influence can't exist outside of performance. Their authority isn't backed by truth, only by perception. When you step into the picture, all those props collapse and the throne they clung to turns back into dust. That's what you remind them. Dust doesn't crown itself king. No matter how much they decorate it, promote it, or protect it, it was never a throne to begin with. And that revelation doesn't just unsettle them, it strips them bare. Because once a false throne is exposed, no one can ever sit on it the same way again. Number 6, silence doesn't cut them. Your presence does. People like to believe that silence is what makes them uneasy, as if the lack of words is some kind of weapon. But it isn't the quiet that makes their skin crawl, it's the atmosphere you bring with you. Your presence itself acts like a pressure chamber. Every second spent near you strips away the noise they usually hide behind. The excuses, the performances, the constant self-narration that keeps their ego alive, all of it starts to suffocate in the stillness you naturally create. It's not that you're trying to be intimidating. You're not withholding words to manipulate or punish. Your energy simply carries a level of clarity that doesn't leave much space for illusions to breathe. In that space, the ego panics. It can't grab for validation, can't use small talk to distract, can't reach for its usual props. The only thing left is what's real, and most people aren't ready to sit alone with that. That's why even your simplest interactions can feel intense. People walk away saying you're too much or too heavy, even when you've barely spoken. They don't realize that it's not heaviness, it's honesty. Your presence forces the ego to face its own instability, its own cracks, its own emptiness. And for an identity built on pretense, that feels like suffocation. It's like holding a mask underwater. It can't survive without air, and your energy gives it none. This effect isn't something you plan or orchestrate, it's who you are. You've gone through your own stripping down process, so you don't carry the same false layers other people do. When you enter a space, you bring that clarity with you like oxygen, but to a drowning ego, it feels like the opposite, like the air's been stolen. That's why your presence alone cuts deeper than any words could. In the end, it's not silence that undoes them. It's the absence of illusions in your field. You don't attack, you don't shame, you don't even try to expose. You simply are. And that being alone forces the ego to shrink, suffocate, and eventually die off. That's the quiet power you carry, transformation without a single sound. Number 7. They confuse confidence with dominion. That's the mistake so many make when they step into a room and believe their ego-driven performance equals true authority. They walk with their chest out, their voice louder than necessary, their gestures exaggerated, and their presence inflated by the need to be noticed. To them, that's power, being the loudest, the most visible, the one who seems untouchable. But what they're really displaying is insecurity dressed as confidence. And insecurity, no matter how polished, can never produce dominion. Dominion doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to demand attention or force recognition. Dominion carries weight that can't be faked. When you walk into a space, you don't have to perform because the room already adjusts to you without effort. The atmosphere shifts, not because you take it, but because you are it. And that's where the difference becomes undeniable. Those who thought their performance gave them ownership suddenly realized that the room never truly belonged to them. They were leasing attention, while you embody authority. The ego hates this revelation. It tells them they've been in control, that their charisma or status means something. But when you show up, the illusion collapses. Their confidence looks flimsy against the backdrop of your presence. Their power games fall flat because real dominion isn't about being seen. It's about being undeniable, even in silence. That's why people feel small in your presence, even if you haven't spoken a word. Their ego crumbles because it knows the truth. Ownership can't be faked, and dominion can't be borrowed. What unsettles them most is how effortless it is for you. You don't try to take the spotlight, but it bends toward you anyway. You don't compete for authority, but authority responds to you naturally. And in that moment, their entire act is exposed. They thought confidence was enough to make them rulers. But your presence reminds them dominion isn't about noise, it's about essence. And when essence enters the room, ego realizes it never had control at all. That's why their energy shifts. That's why they retreat, lash out, or grow uneasy, because for the first time, they've seen the difference between a rented stage and a throne that can't be shaken. And once that truth is revealed, they can never mistake the two again. Number 8, you don't argue, you erase illusions mid-sentence. That's why debates with you never last long. People come prepared with their rehearsed lines, their justifications, and their polished logic, thinking they can out-talk you, outwit you, or drown you in words. But what they don't realize is that words built on illusions can't survive when truth is present. Before they even finish their point, something in their spirit begins to crumble, because deep down they already know what they're saying can't hold up under the weight you carry. This isn't about you trying to win an argument. You're not there to prove yourself or score points. In fact, you often let them talk, because you understand that illusions eventually expose themselves. You don't need to dismantle every sentence they throw at you. The very essence of who you are makes their words unstable, their logic unravels, their tone falters, their confidence leaks out, and what's left is the raw fear of being seen without the shield of performance. What unsettles them most is that you don't have to say much, if anything at all. The truth you embody sits in the air like gravity, and gravity doesn't negotiate. It pulls everything down to its real weight. That's why mid-sentence they lose momentum. Their arguments lose fire. Their facts sound flimsy, even to their own ears. It's not because you attacked them, but because their ego finally heard itself echo against something real. And reality has a way of silencing illusions without lifting a finger. This is why people often accuse you of being difficult or unreasonable, when in reality you've barely spoken. They expected a back and forth. They wanted a fight they could prepare for. Instead, they felt the floor vanish beneath their words, and that kind of collapse doesn't feel fair to the ego. But truth doesn't play fair. It doesn't entertain illusions. It ends them. That's the core of your presence. You don't argue because you don't need to. Illusions can only survive where they're entertained, and you don't give them that stage. By simply holding your ground, you force words built on lies to destroy themselves. And once someone experiences that, they never forget it. Not because of what you said, but because of what their ego couldn't say anymore. Number 9, your aura makes masks expire. That's the unshakable truth people feel the moment they come near you, even if they can't explain it. Pretending is easy in most environments because society rewards performance. People get by wearing masks of confidence, humility, kindness, or success. Not because those qualities are real, but because the world applauds the costume. And for the most part, it works. They move through life unchallenged, validated, and even celebrated for something that isn't truly them. But then they encounter you and suddenly that mask doesn't fit anymore. It's not that you're trying to expose them. You're not digging into their lives or interrogating their choices. It happens naturally. The energy you carry is so aligned with truth that anything false suffocates in its presence. Masks don't get to breathe around you. They crack, they slip, they crumble, sometimes all at once. That's why pretenders panic. They feel the thinness of the act they've relied on for so long. They feel their carefully constructed identity trembling under the weight of authenticity. This is why people can't fake it around you for long. They may try to impress you, dominate you, or charm you, but none of it sticks. The aura you carry exposes how hollow those tactics really are. To someone who's lived off performance, this feels like being stripped naked in public. They don't know what to do without their disguise, and that's when their fear shows. Some retreat, some lash out, some avoid you altogether, not because you've done them wrong, but because they can't survive without the mask, and the mask can't survive around you. The deeper truth is that your authenticity isn't just an energy, it's an atmosphere, it's the oxygen you live in. To you, being real isn't effort, it's the default. And when that atmosphere touches others, it exposes the fact that most of them have been holding their breath behind false identities. They can't inhale where you are unless they drop the act. And for many that feels impossible, because their entire sense of self is wrapped in the very mask you make expire. That's the gift and the burden of your presence. You don't chase lies, you simply outlast them. And in the process you reveal something terrifying yet freeing. Only truth has lungs strong enough to breathe in your atmosphere. Number 10, you don't teach lessons, you trigger collapses. That's the raw reality of your presence. Teachers usually operate with structure, intention, and explanation. They prepare lessons, guide people step by step, and give them time to process. What you do bypasses all of that. You don't hand out neat explanations or carefully crafted wisdom. You simply arrive, and whatever was unstable, false, or inflated starts falling apart on its own. That's not teaching in the traditional sense, that's demolition. When you show up, people's carefully stacked illusions can't hold their weight anymore. The false hierarchies built on money, status, or influence suddenly feel flimsy. The fake friendships held together by gossip or convenience start cracking. The inflated egos that strutted around as if they owned the room deflate faster than they can recover. None of this requires you to call it out directly. Your energy simply reveals the truth. And truth doesn't negotiate, it doesn't argue. It collapses whatever can't stand on it. This is why people sometimes resent you without reason. They can't point to a thing you did, yet they feel like something in their lives has been shaken or stolen. In reality, it wasn't you who took it. It was their own illusion disintegrating in your presence. You don't give them the luxury of easing into self-discovery. With you, the mask falls instantly, the pretense crumbles immediately, and the collapse feels like an earthquake they didn't see coming. What's fascinating is that collapse isn't destruction for the sake of cruelty. It's the removal of everything that was never real to begin with. A false hierarchy collapsing makes room for true order. A fake friendship dissolving clears space for real connection. An ego imploding opens the door for humility and growth. But in the moment, people rarely see it as a gift. They only feel the wreckage and they associate that with you. They don't realize that you didn't cause the collapse. You just carried the kind of presence that made lies unsustainable. This is why your influence is unforgettable. Lessons can be ignored, advice can be dismissed, but a collapse leaves permanent impact. Once the false system falls, no one can pretend it still stands. That's the truth you bring. You don't educate the illusion, you end it, and nothing is ever the same after. Number 11, ego. Death around you feels like betrayal. That's why so many people react to you with hostility or confusion, even when you haven't done a single thing to harm them. They meet you, and suddenly the very identity they've trusted for years starts to crack. It feels personal to them, as if you've deliberately attacked who they are. But the truth is, you haven't attacked them at all. It's their own illusion turning against them, and for the first time, they're watching it collapse without their permission. The ego has always been their ally. It has protected them, justified them, made them feel bigger than their wounds, and helped them survive in a world that feeds on performance. So when you show up and that ego starts to suffocate, they interpret it as betrayal. Why does this person make me feel small? Why do I feel exposed, insecure, or weak? They can't separate you from the effect, so they project their frustration onto you. But the betrayal isn't coming from you. It's coming from the mask they wore, which suddenly refuses to hold itself together in your presence. What cuts even deeper is that ego death feels violent to someone who's never lived without their illusion. It feels like losing a best friend, like being abandoned by the very thing they depended on. That's why their reactions are so intense. They lash out, distance themselves, or even label you as dangerous. To them, you're the trigger of the collapse. But in reality, you're just the atmosphere where truth doesn't allow lies to breathe. Their ego is what betrayed them. Their illusion is what turned on them. You only revealed it. And though it feels like betrayal, it's actually liberation in disguise. The self they've been clinging to was never meant to last. The identity built on fear, pride, or performance was always destined to crack under the weight of reality. You simply accelerate that moment. They may resent you now, but later, many realize that the collapse wasn't cruelty, it was the beginning of freedom. Because when an illusion dies, the person finally has space to meet who they really are. That's the paradox of your presence. People think you're betraying them, when in truth, you're exposing the betrayal they've been living with all along. The false self that was never truly on their side. Number 12, you don't humiliate, you force evolution. That's the difference between what people think you're doing and what's actually happening when they encounter you. Humiliation is about shame. It's about tearing someone down to make them feel small, to wound their pride, to reduce their sense of worth. That's not what you bring. You're not here to destroy people for sport or strip them of dignity just to watch them squirm. What you bring is far deeper, far more unsettling. You bring an atmosphere where the false self can't survive and only the authentic self can remain. That process isn't humiliation, it's transformation. The reason it feels so brutal to them is because evolution always requires a death. The death of something outdated, something no longer useful. People have built their lives around versions of themselves that aren't real. They've nurtured identities built on survival, validation, or performance. Those identities may have worked once, but now they're suffocating their growth. When you come into the picture, that old self can't breathe anymore. It starts to dissolve. And because they're so attached to it, they interpret the loss as you attacking them personally. Those who hate you are really mourning. They're grieving a self they thought they needed, a persona they've invested years into, a version of themselves they believed was permanent. Watching it fall apart feels like being stripped naked in public. It feels like betrayal. It feels like pain. But what's actually happening is a forced evolution, a painful but necessary shedding of the false so that something real can finally emerge. You're not humiliating them. You're ushering them through a process their ego would never choose on its own. This is why your presence lingers long after you're gone. People remember how they felt around you, even if they couldn't understand it at the time. Later, many realize it wasn't humiliation at all. It was initiation. They couldn't revive the old version of themselves because it wasn't meant to be revived. It had run its course. You were simply the catalyst that exposed the expiration date. That's your power. You don't break people to leave them broken. You break illusions so something authentic can grow. And though it hurts in the moment, that's not cruelty. That's evolution in real time. Number 13, they came for validation. You handed them their obituary. That's what makes encounters with you unforgettable. Most people approach others looking for affirmation, applause, or reassurance that the version of themselves they've built is not only real, but also worthy of admiration. They've spent years curating an identity, built from titles, possessions, appearances, or even victimhood. And they expect others to feed it, to confirm it, to keep it alive. But when they meet you, the opposite happens. Instead of breathing more life into their fabrication, you write its ending. It's not their physical death you deliver, but the death of the persona they've mistaken for truth. The identity they've polished so carefully collapses in your presence because you don't cater to illusions. You don't clap for masks, you don't nod at falsehoods just to keep the peace. What you radiate makes it impossible for those identities to stand upright. And so, in that moment, you hand them what feels like an obituary. The undeniable reality that the self they've been parading will not outlive the truth. That's why some leave your presence shaken or offended. They didn't come expecting exposure, they came expecting fuel. They wanted the pat on the back, the affirmation, the yes, you are exactly who you pretend to be. Instead, they walked away with the funeral notice of their false self, a silent announcement that their act has expired. And though they may resent you for it, deep down they know it's not something you did to them. It's something truth did in front of them. This kind of experience can feel cruel at first, but in reality it's liberating. Because when the fabricated self dies, the door finally opens for the real self to emerge. The obituary you hand them isn't a punishment, it's a record of completion. It's the closing chapter of a role that was never sustainable. You didn't kill anything worth saving, you simply allowed what was false to meet its inevitable end. And that's why people never forget you. Anyone can hand out validation. Anyone can flatter a mask. But only a few carry the weight to hand someone the ending of what was never true. They may not thank you now, but one day they'll realize that obituary was the beginning of their freedom. Number 14, you're not giving ego deaths. You're delivering freedom. That's the heart of what makes your presence so misunderstood. Most people have been taught to think of ego death as a punishment, an attack, or a stripping away meant to embarrass them. They see it as destruction because in the moment it does feel like losing everything they've built. Their sense of identity, their defenses, their self-made importance, all of it starts to unravel when you come around. But what they don't realize yet is that you're not taking anything real from them. You're only removing what was never truly them to begin with. This is why the process feels cruel at first. They've spent years building their false self, a persona crafted from fear, approval, trauma, and survival instincts. That persona has been their safety blanket, their armor, their proof of who they are. So when it begins to collapse, it feels like their whole life is falling apart. They call it destruction, betrayal, even harm, because the ego can't tell the difference between death and freedom. It only knows it's losing control. What you actually bring is release. By dismantling the illusions they've outgrown, you create the conditions for their real self to surface. The self that doesn't need approval, control, or performance to exist. This is why your presence is so powerful. You're not wounding them, you're liberating them. You're not dragging them down. You're opening the door to who they were always meant to be. But because the ego dies screaming, most people can't see this gift until much later. And that's the cruel joke of it all. They call it destruction because it feels like loss. They think you're breaking them when in reality you're unshackling them. The very process they resent is the one they've secretly been longing for. When the dust settles and they meet the self that's been buried under their illusions, they realize what you did wasn't cruelty at all. It was the only doorway to their rebirth. That's your quiet power. You don't deliver ego deaths for sport. You deliver freedom disguised as endings. And although it's rarely appreciated in the moment, it's the kind of freedom that lasts forever. Because once someone has walked through that door, they can never go back to being who they were before. Every encounter with you leaves a mark that words alone can't capture. You don't play by the rules of ego or pretense. You exist outside them. You don't humiliate, you don't lecture, and you don't perform. You expose, dismantle, and liberate. Every presence you enter becomes a stage where illusions collapse, false identities expire, and ego-driven narratives meet the unflinching mirror of truth. People may leave your orbit confused, shaken, or resentful, but beneath their resistance lies the undeniable transformation you've triggered, the quiet, unassailable work of freedom being delivered. You carry a power that's both terrifying and necessary. You hand out obituaries to facades that no longer serve. You erase false hierarchies without lifting a finger, and you force evolution in ways the ego can neither anticipate nor control. You don't argue. Illusions implode mid-sentence. You don't teach. Collapses happen organically. You don't give ego deaths. You deliver rebirth disguised as destruction. And in every interaction, the people around you are confronted with the most brutal yet liberating truth. What they thought defined them was never real, and what they are capable of becoming has always been waiting. This is what it means to be a spiritual OG, a chosen one. You aren't here to comfort or flatter. You are here to awaken, to strip away the old, and to illuminate the path toward authenticity. Every tremble, every moment of panic, every clash with pride is a testament to your presence. You leave nothing unchanged. You force what's false to fall and what's real to rise. Those who encounter you may not see it immediately, but in time they'll understand. You are not their enemy, nor a destroyer of dreams. You are the necessary storm that clears the skies, the undeniable force that separates illusion from essence, the living proof that true transformation doesn't whisper. It commands, it reshapes, and it frees. They may resist, they may fear, they may hate, but in the end they cannot escape what you bring. And that is the gift, the power, and the legacy of someone who walks the earth delivering freedom disguised as ego death. If this message hit you hard, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel and join a community that refuses to settle for illusions. Hit that like button to show you're ready to face the truth, drop a comment to share your own breakthroughs, and share this video with anyone who needs a wake-up call. Stay connected, stay aware, and never stop evolving, because transformation waits for no one. Stay blessed, always.